Hello and welcome back to Rock Cycle. I hope you're having a good day. Well, today we've got a bit of a different video for you as I have to expand my content beyond just festivals this year, unfortunately. And if you've got any ideas for videos that aren't exactly festival related but maybe still in the same sort of ballpark, let me know down in the comments because I'm running low on ideas. But today we are looking at separating art from the artist and the cancel culture, which has become quite linked to that. This is a topic that has been well discussed many times in the past, but it has been something that I've been quite curious about recently and I've been very interested by it. So many musicians and artists have done things that are clearly bad, or they've been accused of doing things that are pretty bad. Does that mean we can still enjoy their music, or should we cancel them instead? Let's get into it. Right, I just wanted to add before we go fully into the video, I actually recorded this about almost 2 months ago now. You can probably tell that my lockdown hair was not quite as bad at that point, but I just thought I should say this was recorded quite a while ago, before there was such a big resurgence in the Black Lives Matter movement and such a big resurgence in the Me Too movement. And because this video deals with some quite sensitive topics that revolve around those two issues, I sort of wanted to delay it a bit because I didn't want to put this video out at a time when those were very pressing issues, when people were very upset about some of those things, and it didn't really feel right to make a video almost capitalising off it in that way. So I have delayed this again and again and again. And I kept meaning to re-release this, but then it seems to have been so many sexual assault allegations. There's always one coming out every week. So really, it's made me realise now there is never a good time to release a video like this. And maybe that's why it's important to release a video like this, because it's going to be a continual problem. So I just thought I'd add that in quickly here at the beginning. Notice this isn't about any specific event that has gone on recently. It's sort of looking at these topics in general. So with that, I'll go back to pass Cameron. Right, there is a couple of things I want to add on to the beginning of this video before we go fully into the topic. First of all, I'm not entirely sure what I think on all of this, and I think that's partly why I do find this topic so interesting. There are lots of different opinions and lots of different arguments, and we're going to look through some of those today. But the point of this video isn't to tell you what to do or what to think. You're welcome to do whatever you want as long as you can justify it. But the point of this video isn't to tell you what to do or what to think. It's rather to have a bit of a conversation about it. We are all definitely entitled to our own views and opinions, but on such a controversial and moral topic like this, I think it's very good and very healthy to have very open conversations about the issue and look at it from multiple points of view. But as well as that, this video is going to cover some sensitive topics such as sexual assault, racism, homophobia and a few other things, because of the kind of serious nature of cancel culture and separating art from the artist. So maybe if you're someone who is a bit sensitive about those topics, firstly I hope you're doing alright and staying strong, but secondly, maybe this isn't the video for you, unfortunately. So what is separating art from the artist? For those of you that don't know, well, basically you got the art and you got the artist. Some people view them as one thing and they're not separate. Some people view them as two separate things. So why should you separate them? We'll start this video off on. Well, the simple reason people usually give for this is because objectively a good song is still a good song. And the artist's actions, besides the actions of creating the music, do have ultimately no effect usually on the end product. And people argue that just because you support the art, it doesn't mean that you are supporting the artist, and you view them as two separate things, and liking one doesn't mean that you like the other. And I do believe it is fully possible to completely hate an artist but still enjoy their music, but where a lot of this conversation and controversy comes around is how you engage with their music after you know about the controversial thing that they've done. Some people feel they are still able to engage with the artist's art product, and some people feel they don't. It is a very personal choice, and I can't really say what is right or wrong on this. But the inevitable problem is you can't really just support the art and not support the artist in some way. When it comes to things like streaming a song or buying a CD, you could say you are just supporting the music, but also indirectly you are financially supporting the artist behind them. You're promoting them. Maybe you've already bought a CD, you can listen to it in a bit more peace because you know that listening to it now isn't really promoting them or helping them financially, because that already happened in the past. And in cases where the artist has since died, you could argue it is a bit different, but some would also argue you are still supporting their legacy. I guess we already started talking about this a bit, but why shouldn't you separate art from the artist? So the exact reason can really vary, but it's often because the artist has done something that you are very morally opposed to. There are some reasons that are very universally agreed on as being a bad thing, such as some unfortunate examples such as sexual assault and rape, where I think anyone with a brain cell will agree that those are bad things. But then there's other cases where whether it's bad or not is a lot more subjective, such as maybe the artist made an edgy and offensive joke on their Twitter, which some people view as fine and some people view as not fine. So while the exact reasons are changeable and debatable, it's generally agreed that people don't want to financially and socially support an artist that they strongly disagree with their actions. And in the 21st century, in a big part thanks to Twitter, this has led to cancel culture. Now, cancel culture isn't exactly a new thing. Boycotting's been going on for decades and decades. It's rather this term of cancel culture and how we enact this boycotting has changed with the use of social media. And in theory, cancel culture is actively involving others and sharing your opinions on thoughts about why this artist shouldn't be separated from their art and why you should no longer support their art. And in theory, this leads to deplatforming harmful individuals. But the reality of cancel culture can be a bit different. Judging from my own experience on Twitter, some of the things I've seen to do with cancel culture can be very toxic and sometimes based on misleading comments or outright lies. And one thing that does really personally bug me quite a lot is you do see some accounts that are fully willing to create this cancel culture or capitalise on it and exploit it just to grow their own audience. And sometimes you see them outright starting beef with relatively innocent artists just so they can get a tweet with a few thousand likes on it. So sometimes cancel culture is a cause for good, but I think sometimes it also does more harm than good. But is cancel culture always fair? There is quite a bit of a murky ground to do with accusations that we're going to get into fully later on in the video. But I think it's also worth considering, if you had hundreds of thousands of fans following your every move and everything you did, and hundreds of journalists looking into your past, would you always look good? And I mean this more around the kinds of topics such as maybe making a joke that would upset some people or making a hurtful comment that maybe we've moved on and regretted, rather than some of the cancel culture topics such as sexual assault. Right, so I'm interrupting the video again while editing, this time another couple of weeks later, because I am very lazy at editing anything that's over 10 minutes, to be honest with you. And that's kind of because while I was looking back and watching the video while editing, I realised I focused a lot more on the negatives of cancel culture and I kind of forgot to bring up some of the more positive aspects of it, and I think it's important to talk about those too, trying to have a fair and balanced discussion about cancel culture. So sometimes we get cancel culture over relatively small and unimportant issues, like just where you disagree with someone on something small, and I think those aren't that important. I think times when cancel culture can be used for good is when someone is in a position of power, be that social power, financial power, social influence, and all of those things, when they're using that position of power for something actively harmful. Now, we're all going to disagree about what actively harmful is, but I think we all agree we don't want someone who is doing something bad and hurting other people to be in a position of power. Sometimes this is hurting just an individual person or two, and sometimes this is hurting a large group of people or community or social group. And sometimes these people in these positions of power that we have given them have a very legitimate, dangerous threat to different people, and it is very dangerous to keep these people in such a position of power and respect. When it comes to musicians, we as fans gave them this power, we have enabled them and we have given them this influence, and we have a right and a responsibility to take it away from them as we see fit, as well as a right to criticise. When we have given all this money, all this power, all this influence and all this promotion to someone who is then using that position to go out of their way and hurt other people or do actions that are indirectly hurting other people, I think there's a very legitimate argument that you should actively try and take that power away from them. And not just maybe stop streaming them. Another important part of this is sharing information, and that's a big part of cancel culture, using the hashtags and whatever on Twitter to get the information out and make more people aware about an issue that they wouldn't be aware about otherwise. And while some people will use these movements on Twitter to try and force people to do things, I don't think that's right. You can't force other people to do things. You should use the movement to share information and allow people to come up with their own conclusion themselves. So whether this is effective or not does vary case by case, but I think it is very important that we all try and stop bad things happening in the world. I think we got a bit of responsibility for that, and cancel culture is a way that some people try and stop bad things happening in the world and try and stop enabling it. Whether that's the right way to do it or the wrong way will always be debated about and disagreed, especially case by case, because cancel culture as a whole can be very varied. But so far we have looked at the two extreme different sides of the argument, but really there's quite a big middle ground that I think quite a lot of people find themselves in. Some people may believe you can't separate art from the artist, but don't believe you should to cancel them after one bad comment. When it's some of these more mild harmful things that artists can do, I think you can fully disagree with them and not want to support it. But maybe when it's a smaller thing, you can just be like, I'll ignore it this one time and I'll still listen to their music even though I don't support their individual act this time. And I know this does sound trivial, but I do think people can have a very strong emotional connection to music. I'm sure we've all got those songs that really mean something to us personally. Maybe it's not the general meaning of the song. Maybe it's the song that you and your partner like to sing and dance to. Maybe it's the song you angrily listened to after you had a nasty breakup and you'd put it on and go cry in your bedroom. I think songs like that, when they have such a strong emotional meaning to you, maybe you can hate an artist for what they did, but this one song means so much to you, it's a lot harder to fully cancel them and boycott them, even though you absolutely are disgusted by what the artist did. One other middle ground comment I see a lot is, yes, this thing was bad, but this was done when the person was young and they've changed and moved on. Such as one example I see quite a few times is Stormzy, who when he was younger had a few homophobic tweets when he was a teenager. Since then he has moved on and he has apologised about them, and whether that's a sincere apology or not, I think is up to you to judge for yourself. I do certainly think artists can progress and change, but I think they kind of have to demonstrate to fans that they have progressed and changed since those old harmful ways. And I think Stormzy has done things to show that, and I think a lot of other artists who made mistakes in the past have done a lot of things to prove that they've improved as a person and they've helped out those communities which they may have harmed in the past. Whether arguments like that resonate with you or not will vary from person to person and case from case, but I think one thing that really is a big factor in whether you accept an apology or not is how closely linked to the artist's action you were. For an example, I hope I shouldn't have to say this, but I'm not racist and I don't want to be actively supporting a racist musician. But if a musician made a racist comment, I don't think it would ever have the same sort of emotional and personal impact on me that it would from someone who has been a victim of racist actions in the past. But I do think if you are someone who is more linked to the artist's actions, you probably have a much stronger stance opposing them than someone who isn't linked to them as much. Hello, it is Future Cameron again. Now I just thought I should probably really expand on this point a bit because I felt like I've changed my mind. I feel a lot of people have with those points I've just made over the past few months. Like, yes, I still think it is true to a degree that things that personally affect you will have a bigger impact on you than something that doesn't personally affect you. I think like the Black Lives Matter movement has really shown me and a lot of people to realise that we shouldn't really be just ignoring things that don't affect us. Like, yes, this may not be a personal insult or personal dig at you, but just because it isn't to do with you doesn't mean it's important. So I do still think it is true to a degree, but I think a lot of us need to realise and change our attitudes a lot more to realise, like, yeah, it doesn't affect us, but just ignoring it, that's part of the problem. As people have been saying, it's not enough not to be racist, you have to be anti-racist. So I think that's been quite a big learning curve for me and quite a few people. So it's still true to a degree, but I think that point is definitely going to become a lot less common of a mindset, and that mentality has really been challenged a lot, and that is probably for the better. So back to past Cameron. One other sort of middle ground argument I see a lot is it was a product of its time. Probably the most infamous example of that is Fairy Tale of New York with its homophobic slur that gets played on British radio and TV every single Christmas to quite a lot of controversy. And we do get some people saying it doesn't matter when it was, homophobia is bad no matter whether it's now or in the past. We do also get people saying these are harmful actions, but they have reasons to justify why they still listen to it. Well, one big one unfortunately is just a lot of people don't care about the homophobia in the song. But I do also hear people saying the singers and the musicians in the song weren't as well educated and informed as people today. They didn't know any better about using that slur at the time. And we do also see people saying things like, that's what society was like at the time, and it's kind of unfair just to blame that all on one person. And it is most likely that every historical artist, whether that be a painter or a musician, did hold some views that would be viewed as relatively harmful and bad views to have today. And we can't really cut out all historical art from our society because it plays a very big important cultural role. So some people may still listen to this song and sort of view it as a way to learn from the mistakes in the past. Like, yes, this song is enjoyable even if it has bad things in, but we can listen to this, realise it's bad, and then we can make songs that are better than this in the future. So I do think it is a lot harder to separate art from the artist when the problematic parts of the artist are in the lyrics of the song. And I do think it's very hard to separate the two when they're really intertwined, and listening to the music forces you to focus on this thing you may or may not disagree with. So in cases like this, I don't really think you can separate art from the artist. I think you either have to just not care, or maybe you're unaware, which has also happened to me a few times. I've had a couple of times when I've been listening to songs, enjoying them, but I sort of only realised later when I properly listened to them and paid attention that they're saying some pretty fucked up things in the lyrics which I really don't want to support. And sometimes I also think you just have to be intentionally ignorant to enjoy the music. So now to look on to some famous examples of cancel culture and separating art from the artist. Probably and very unfortunately the most infamous example that links to this YouTube channel all about rock music is The Lost Prophets. Now if you don't know who The Lost Prophets were, they were a very popular noughties hard rock band. They were gaining a very strong following, potentially future festival headliners. They're going on tours supporting Linkin Park and Deftones, and they're growing pretty well, and they're very well received by fans and critics alike generally. But then the singer was found guilty in court of doing something pretty horrible, which I'm not very comfortable discussing the details with on this YouTube channel. If you don't know what it is, you can Google it, but I'll just say you won't enjoy what you'll see. And this very quickly saw the rest of the band immediately disbanding. And their music was very heavily boycotted. This was before the term cancel culture was being used as far as I'm aware, but this effectively was cancel culture out in full force. And in the case of Lost Prophets, people were not separating art from the artist, and cancel culture had a massive impact on them. Sales and streams of their music absolutely plummeted at the time. They're still relatively low today, and even today people will still rarely play their music in public places such as bars and clubs. And to give a bit of an example of how much they have fallen down, they've played Reading Elise Festival a few times. I think the last time they played there they were 4th down. So I looked at the Reading Elise Festival acts that played 4th down in 2019 and what was going to be the 2020 festival, and the average one of them had about 2 to 3 million Spotify listeners, excluding Billie Eilish because she is definitely a massive outlier. But compared to that, Lost Prophets only have a little under 100,000 monthly Spotify listeners. So presuming that Lost Prophets were about the same size as the bands that are playing 4th down the festival now, there's still only about 1 in 20 people that would be listening to them is currently listening to their music. And that's on Spotify at least. I know it doesn't represent the whole music industry. So it does definitely seem in this case a lot of people decided you can't separate art from the artist and led to cancelling the band. And I think a big part of that was due to it being such a serious and horrible crime that the singer committed. But I do still see debates every now and again on Facebook and Twitter about listening to them because 100,000 people still are on Spotify alone. And while that's a lot less than they should potentially have for an artist of their size, there's certainly still a big number of people. The most common argument I've seen about still listening to the band is that they still think what the singer did was absolutely horrible. Maybe they just weren't aware about it, or maybe they think them listening to the band doesn't really support it. Because ultimately one person's streams don't really contribute that much to the artist individually. But you do see people who do just fully separate art from the artist and just flat out don't care what the artist did, even though it was such an extreme thing in this case. But there have been other examples where people have separated art from the artist more and it hasn't led to cancel culture. One of the most well-known ones is Michael Jackson and the accusations against him, and he still has 21 million monthly Spotify listeners despite them. And another is Chris Brown assaulting women, but he still has 27 million monthly Spotify listeners. And he did definitely see a lot of initial backlash at the time, but I think that has really died down as a lot of people have sort of forgotten about it or just moved on, as it was about 10 years ago now. So it does seem how severe and how bad the crime was, plus the level of proof plays a big part into people's reactions to things like this. Now I do certainly think one way that cancel culture has evolved and separating art from the artist that makes it more relevant to our generation more than ones in the past, arguably, thanks to social media, is accusations. There are many musicians who have been accused of many different things, but unfortunately there is a bit of a common trend of it being to do with sexual assault. And this territory is a lot more murky and sees a lot more disagreements, because we never definitively know usually whether they did or didn't do it. And I do think we all are, myself included, are biased towards the musicians. It is entirely superficial, but we feel like we have a connection, we feel like we have a relationship with artists where we've been listening to them so much and following them on social media, etc. But it does feel hard to believe that someone you think that you know when you really don't. It's hard to believe that they could do such a thing. It's definitely worth saying that the size of the artists you see on social media definitely are not a true reflection of them and what they're like in real life, and I don't think it's a true reflection of what anyone's like in real life. And I think probably myself included in this, and fans do let this sort of cloud our judgment when it comes to scenarios like this where a singer has been accused of doing something pretty horrible. Very unfortunately, this isn't helped by cases such as Don Broco, and I think there's even a case with Justin Bieber ages and ages ago where it's been proven that the accuser was lying and making it up. Even though I'm extremely sure this is an absolute minority of cases, it's really sort of led to this large level of public distrust in these accusations and claims. And it is quite a big shame because it really damages people who are making legitimate claims against these artists and are just looking for justice. And really, I can't give a coverall statement about accusations because every case is so different. I just think we all need to step back, try and look at the evidence objectively, not cloud our judgment, and choose what we want to personally do on that. And it is definitely worth adding at the end, I think that we are all aware that legal decisions aren't always definitive, and just because someone is found innocent or guilty in a court of law doesn't always mean they did or didn't do it, because there have been multiple mistrials that I'm sure you're well aware of some famous examples of. One thing I just want to add at the end before we fully wrap this up, which I think makes music a bit different to other forms of art, and that is that a song isn't the product of just one person. Maybe we only hear one person singing at the end of the day and we all like to imagine they made this song all by themselves. But there's also the whole rest of the band. There's sound engineers, there's production, there's management, there's advertising. Really every single song is a result of hundreds of people's work. And presuming these people weren't aware of the artist's actions, which sometimes will be the case, sometimes won't be, and it's hard to definitively say, but presuming they weren't aware of the actions of artists, is it fair to involve them in this cancelling because it's going to impact and hurt them too? And no, to be honest, it's entirely unfair of them. Like, I do feel personally very sorry for the other members of Lost Prophets who I don't think were aware of what the singer was doing, but they put their life's work into that band, they put their life's work into making that music, and it's now just all been destroyed and discredited by society because of what someone else did and not what they did. So I've been recording for about 45 minutes now and I do really need a nap. But I think we've sort of generally covered everything, hopefully, on this. There are lots of different arguments and opinions on this topic, so I can't really cover them all in just one video. So I thought I'd end this with my own personal opinions on the whole thing in case anyone cares. But anyway, these aren't meant to influence you, and I would be curious to see your own opinions in the comments down below. But personally, I listen to some bands that still have slightly problematic singers. Usually it's because I think they've done things that I don't find that serious personally, or maybe they were serious things but the artist has shown they've moved on and progressed from that and they're doing better things now. But that is only for some of the more mild bad things an artist can do. For extreme cases like Lost Prophets, I just don't think I can ever listen to them again in the same way. For them, I personally can't separate art from the artist, and I just feel uncomfortable listening to their music now because it reminds me of what happened, and that's just not something I want to think about. So yeah, that's my thoughts. Again, I would be very curious to know your thoughts on cancel culture and separating art from the artist down in the comments. Please be nice to each other because I reckon there's a good chance some of you will definitely disagree with each other. This is where I usually say, hopefully you enjoyed the video, and I don't really know if I hope you enjoyed it today because of some of the topics that we talked about. Hopefully you found it informative or interesting maybe, rather than enjoyable. But anyway, like, share, subscribe, the usual YouTube shit. I do feel like an arsehole saying that at the end of the video talking about some of these topics, but fuck it, it's YouTube. And hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.